Mars here, and welcome to another book review, albeit one that's gonna be a little bit different than the others. So, for those of you who don't know, Five Nights at Freddy's, one of my favorite indie horror series of all time, has a series of books out. They're called the Five Nights at Freddy's interactive novels. And essentially the way they work is that they're choose your own adventure stories. I quite like them. They are very interesting. However, there's not many of them, which is one of my few and I understand why. Like, obviously they're very difficult to write, choose your own adventure novels, and I feel like with the ones we got, they're actually pretty solid. But essentially the series is done, so to kind of make up for lost time, to kind of make up for the fact that, I have been gone for a while, I have decided to make one big review out of all of them. Essentially, it's kind of taking some ideas that I've taken from doing the second channel. I am going to be doing a series of mini reviews for each of the books, all three of them, well, four of them. We'll get to that immediately, but yeah, we're going to be going through all four of the books that have released as part of the interactive novel series. And I am going to, generally speaking, just give my thoughts on all of them, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this kind of format. But yeah, I'm going to be breaking it up into different sections. We're going to be giving each book its own review to kind of, make up for that kind of, lack of content. And I do want to be able to give a thorough examination of all of these, because they are all fun. There's a lot of stuff in them. And I feel like there would be a lot of fun for, a Five Nights at Freddy's fan to want to collect. So, without further ado, I am going to start getting into the reviews now. And starting with the first one, we have... Okay, so, real talk, this first book actually does not have a physical release yet. I'll explain that. The first book, V.I.P, is actually virtual book on, your typical book app or whatever it is you read. I read it on Barnes & Noble Nook. That's the one I personally use. It's also, I believe, available on Kindle. I believe it's available on iPads, or wherever it is you read your ebooks. That is where you can find this one, and this is also the only one to be free. This is everything else, all the other three books, which I have all here. They're all about $12, so yeah, they're not very expensive. This one, however, is free, and more to the point, it is getting a physical release, but it's getting a physical release as part of the box set, which is why I decided to make this review, is that they finished that it's getting a box set with all four of the books, including V.I.P, getting a physical release. So yeah, the first one is actually Book 0, V.I.P, and V.I.P is interesting. So, not in the sense that the other ones are. The other ones have a lot more meat to them, which I will get to in a minute. But V.I.P is interesting in that it's a really good book in the sense that it both teaches you how the other books are intended to work, which is that it essentially functions as a tutorial for the rest of the series, which I quite like. It's a very short-ish book. You can easily get through it. Although you do have to do some math, it's the only one of these where you're required to do some math. So, take that in take that into consideration when you do your read along of it. But yeah, this one essentially is meant to actually bridge this book in particular is meant to bridge the games with another series of books that came out that I also have called Tales from the Pizzaplex. And Tales from the Pizzaplex essentially are these, they're more traditional novel type things, but they're these short story type novels, kind of similar to how Goosebumps works, where you read through a series of three short stories, and then there's a fourth story that connects them together. It's repeating this formula from Fazbear Frights, which we'll get to in a minute, because again, there's another story in here that is kind of connected to that as well. But yeah, essentially, V.I.P does a really good job, I think, of connecting the gap. So first and foremost, kind of getting into the story of it, VIP is interesting because it follows two kids, Devin and Ike. Devin gets randomly selected to join the VIP program at his local Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex, which is the setting of Security Breach Ruin, and Help Wanted 2. So, he randomly gets selected for this thing that he did, for this contest that he didn't even remember entering. And, of course, he is a little bit annoyed that he has to bring along his kid brother, because he doesn't like having Ike follow him around all the time. And because, you know, he's the big brother, Ike's the little brother. He doesn't like having his little brother follow him around. I can understand that. But essentially, he's also annoyed that Devin wanted to invite a friend to come along with him to the Mega Pizzaplex with the VIP pass, but unfortunately, his mom said, no, you gotta bring your brother because that would be fun for the two of you. And so he wound up bringing his brother, which annoyed the hell out of him. And of course, upon getting there, he meets an AI called V.I.P, he's fun in that he's you know, a pun. His name is essentially a play on the acronym V.I.P, which stands for Very Important Person. V.I.P's name stands for Very Informative Pig, and he is a pig-based AI, which I kind of like a lot. It's very fun, but essentially, as the main thread of the book continues, you go in, you meet VIP. We find out that VIP has not been used in a while. Unfortunately, VIP, as we find out, VIP is both an example of a strong AI, which means that he is fully intelligent. And we find out that he is actually the one who has to pick Devin for his VIP pass thing that he was asked to be a part of. So, yeah, he's revealed to be a smart AI as opposed to a weak AI, which is what we have now. Essentially, VIP, we find out he just picked a list of names of people who hadn't been at the Mega Pizzaplex in around 6 months and are not currently, you know, missing or deceased. And so he invited Devin and his brother, and to a lesser extent his brother, to the Mega Pizzaplex to kind of give one last chance of showing that, hey, I can still be useful. And unfortunately, the reason we find out is that VIP does not get used because kids like doing their own thing, essentially. He is not allowed to be used. He is not allowed to be run on anything. And unfortunately, parents do not like paying a premium for him because he is obviously a premium experience. He is named after a VIP program. Obviously, he is meant to be like, hey, you are special, you are important, and you get to do some really cool stuff with me while you're here. Unfortunately, that did not work out super great for VIP, and so Devin is the first person to actually, you know, go and hang out with him in like months, in a while. So, and ultimately, this is where the book kind of starts getting into the choices. So, yeah, each book gives you a series of choices and endings. VIPs is a little bit more interesting and a little bit more interesting. As I said, it's a tutorial for how these books work, so the book's a little bit more interesting in how it goes about this. So, to start off, VIP of course recruits Devin to, you know, come along and hang out with him on the grounds that, you know, you never leave him behind ever. Which is, of course, one of the first of many choices that you can make that can go wrong. And that's something. A lot of these choices, they end with somebody dying. Like, it's Five Nights at Freddy, so obviously that's going to happen. But yeah, Devin, of course, then proceeds to, you know, bring VIP and Ike along. They head on their way to Bonnie Bowl, and then Devin realizes he gets kind of annoyed about the fact that he has, you know, essentially has to be a babysitter and the babysat. So he decides to break his promise to VIP to never leave him behind, and also breaks his promise to his mom to always watch his little brother. So he leaves Ike and VIP at the carousel, and then ditches them to go hang out with his friends. They, of course, do not believe him because obviously the VIP program has not been used in a while, and obviously, and the passes that are used for the VIP program are described to be a lot less glamorous compared to the regular admission passes, which is interesting. You'd think it'd be the other way around, and I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I guess that just kind of tells a little bit more about Fazbear Entertainment and their priorities, because obviously this is the VIP program, which interestingly, it's supposed to be more expensive, but they use cheaper materials to make the VIP program because not as many people use it, which is I mean, fair enough. I mean, that makes perfect sense. But yeah, ultimately, they don't believe him, and then VIP gets, pissed off. Essentially what happens is, VIP kidnaps Ike. How is a little bit interesting, because VIP is described to not be a physical animatronic. He can only appear on screens. So VIP appears, reveals that he's angry about, he essentially hijacks the Fazcade, is upset about Devin about the fact that, he obviously does not like the idea of being left behind, and that Devin broke his promise. And as punishment, forces Devin to play a game. Essentially, what Devin is forced to do is play every single attraction in the Mega Pizzaplex once, or he's not allowed to see his brother ever again. And Devin, of course, is forced to accept because, of course, you don't really have much of a choice. He doesn't really have much of a choice in that regard. But what I like about essentially, this is why I say it's a bit of a tutorial. So all of the choices are meant to teach you how to play, are meant to lead you through each of the different games that you're meant to play. So it's a very simple and straightforward kind of book. That's here's the premise, here's the setup. You got to get through all of these games with the 5 tokens we've given you, or you don't get to win the book and you get a game over. So in that regard, yes, very straightforward. But I do like it. As a premise, it is really interesting in that regard. Because again, it's the tutorial. But what I do like about this is that some of the endings, obviously again, you can get game overs, but after the point, some of the points is that you can, of course, get into some game overs where it is real that it's implied that VIP is a little unstable, which is implied to be the real reason nobody actually pays a premium for his services. But yeah, VIP is established to be a little bit unstable, and several of the animatronics, the physical animatronics, when you go to visit and actually beat their games, imply that they do not particularly trust VIP. And Roxy even admits that she fully understands what VIP. She implies that she knows VIP. Took Devin's brother, and points out, hope you find your kid brother. Essentially, just implying that yes, none of the other animatronics actually trust VIP. So it's clear, and this is for good reason, because some of the endings reveal that VIP has done this with other kids, and they didn't listen to VIP, and then he brought them to a back room and locked them in there forever, and then they died. So yeah, it is implied that and this is, of course, when you actually play through the book itself, it's heavily implied that VIP. The reason being is that VIP is A, very lonely, but also B, a very big stickler for the rules, as the whole reason he kidnaps Ike is because Devin did not said that he wasn't going to stick with him. Said he was going to stick with him for the whole day, and then left and never came back. So yeah, VIP is not particularly happy about that. But yeah, and also some of the ways you can lose, of course, if you continue to not play the game by VIP's rules. Which is to say, for example, if you go to Roxy Raceway, you have to sneak VIP in, otherwise you lose the race, and you also don't get to play through the game anymore, because he's like, well, you broke the one rule I asked you not to, one of my rules, which is don't leave me behind, and you left me behind, so you have to leave and never come back. So yeah, essentially that's the whole premise. And honestly, it is actually kind of easy when you know what to do, of how to get through the endings and beat the book. Essentially, but it's also a little bit unique in how you actually beat the book. So one thing that is actually established later as the series goes on is that each of these books has a second playthrough you can play through. And essentially the way this works is that you get the bonus, that you get the true ending, and then you get a bonus item that you're able to carry through for the next playthrough. And when you use the bonus item at certain choices, you get a new story that allows you to play through it in a different way. That is something that all three of the numbered books have. V.I.P's is a little bit different. So the way V.I.P works is that you have to get 1,000 points to win. And you only have 5. Well, technically you have 9 tokens. There's 2 you can find. And that's something else I should have just mentioned. Each of these books also has an easy mode, which gives you a bunch of different items. V.I.P's is essentially, you get 2 extra tokens to play through the games with, but you don't need them. So, you don't need them, but you have 9 tokens total to play through all 5 of the games that you need. So all 5 of the games can give you 1,100 points, which is more than enough than you need, but only if you do them correctly. So, yeah, essentially you have to, and also you have to visit, Rockstar Row last, because it's important to one of the endings, but also the true ending. But it's also B, you can get a balloon here, which gives you 100 points, but if you bring it with you to the Monty's Monster Maze, you don't get to beat Monty's Monster Maze because he can see the balloon. So he will just follow you around the maze because he can see it and win. So yeah, unfortunately that's the way you're meant to play through the game. But yeah, you gotta play through that last one last. But ultimately, when you beat it, you do manage to rescue Ike, and ultimately you agreed to just never talk to your mom about this again. And you reconcile. Obviously, Devin, having gone through all of this, now begins to appreciate Ike a little more because you realize, I almost lost my brother. I'm going to cherish him a little bit more. So, but of course, we find out in this ending that V.I.P, that Devin is not the only kid that V.I.P has unfortunately sent out a bunch of invitations to. Unfortunately, he sent out a bunch of invitations to a bunch of other kids. So, yeah, unfortunately, and Devin can't, of course, bring this to, the security guard or anybody else, because if he does, then nobody will believe him. So, unfortunately, he has to just keep his mouth shut and let it go. And that's, unfortunately, how the book ends if you play through it the normal way. But there is something you can do to get the true ending. Essentially, if you go through the game again, there is well, not necessarily again, but if you go off the beaten path, there is something called the MOA, the Max Occupancy Experience. It is shaped like Glamlock Rock Freddy's head. You can put it on, it's like a VR headset. But essentially, the way it works is that first and foremost, we're given the hint that this is how you're supposed to get the true ending, because the V.I.P does not care for it. He openly admits that it's he's very bored and unenthusiastic about it, and points out that it's not as good as the real thing, so you probably should not play through this one. And just keep going through the physical games instead. It's very archaic, you wouldn't like it. But, and then we find out the reason why. I mentioned before that if you go to Rockstar Row, it's tied to one of the endings. That's because V.I.P's room is hidden in Rockstar Row. If you go to Rockstar Row, you can find V.I.P's room, but he has made it clear that you can't get in there with the points available in the normal playthrough. It costs 100,000 points in there. At maximum in the main Pizzaplex, you can only get 1,100. So there's no way in hell you're getting that many points. So unless of course you play through the MOA experience, since the MOA is designed in a way to give you a compensation, because as you can probably guess by name, it's designed in a way to give you to give you an experience identical and outright better than the original experience in the Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, as compensation for the fact that you cannot actually visit the Mega Pizzaplex. Unfortunately, because of the Mega Pizzaplex, you can't go into any of the, stuff or anything. You can't go into any of the things or anything like that because that's the point. The Mega Pizzaplex is at max occupancy, which means you cannot, in fact, play through the Mega Pizzaplex. You go through the Mega Pizzaplex the normal way. So if you get the Moe helmet, it compensates for that by giving you a 10 times bonus on all points you get of it you earn. So essentially, 10,000 points essentially gets you 10,000 points if you play through it, which gives you more. However, you can also go back to the Moe again inside the Moe, put it on again, and now you're able to meet the point threshold for V.I.P's room. So if you play through the games again correctly to get the 1,000 points you need, you should have more. You should have the 100,000 points you need in order to get into Moe's room. At which point you can get it, or V.I.P's room. But you can go into V.I.P's room, shut him off. And that's how you get the true ending. V.I.P's dealt with. He never does this with anybody else. And Fazbear Entertainment, of course, covers up the whole thing because V.I.P, of course, does not actually exist inside of the actual game. He was made up for this book, and the book is meant to be a self-contained thing. So it makes sense that he does not show up again. So, yeah, ultimately that's what the story is. You go through. I didn't of course go through a lot of the book because obviously going through it and figuring out how to get to all the points is itself the fun part. You're supposed to go through the book, read through it, and it's also been out for over a year at this point, or almost a year at this point, because it was made to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's. So it was made as a free book of being like, okay, we're doing this thing as a celebration for Five Nights at Freddy's, so it's free. You can read through it, and it does a really good job as the 10th anniversary book, I think, because it introduces us to a new series of books, which is really good. But also it bridges the gap between this and another series of books, which is also really good. So overall, I like it. It's obviously very short and simple in what it is, but I like it. It's really good at establishing what this series is going to be going forward. And I do like that as a premise. Like, it's not super complicated, and it doesn't have to be. So overall, it's a great series of books. I highly recommend. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. Obviously, it is free, so you can read it for yourself at any point and just download it onto your phone or tablet or whatever you have and just read it. And I do recommend picking it up. It is literally the admission is free. My only complaint with it is that the ebook parts of it don't work right some of the time. So you do have to know, for case in point, in order to actually get to V.I.P's room, it does take a bit of a detour, and you have to remember some of the pages that you flipped to and from. But overall, it is good book. It is a good book. I recommend it. And but it's also obviously not the most interesting book because all the other books do a lot more heavy lifting in terms of the lore department. This one just kind of explains that, oh yeah, the Mega Pizzaplex has been renovated a couple of times. So if things don't feel one-to-one between the book and the games, don't worry about it. And honestly, I like that as a premise. It does do a good job of bridging the gap while being like, yeah, we're changing some things to make it more in line with the games. And we're explaining that as renovations. So if you've got a problem with that, take it up with Scott. And I do like that idea. But yeah, in case that is indeed the first book. So in case, onward to the next book, which is okay, so starting off with the actual physical books now, we have the first book, the actual book number 1, Five Nights at Freddy's The Week Before. This book is really, really something. I'm going to tell you that right now. This book's really something. So first and foremost, Five Nights at Freddy's The Week Before, well, it's kind of continuing on with the thread of V.I.P, kind of sort of bridging the gap between some of the books and some of the games. This book is implied to be fully in canon to the games because of how the description at the back reads. It obviously is set during the events of FNAF 1, and it follows around the phone guy during his last week at the office at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which I find really, really cool. We also find out his name, of course. His name is officially confirmed to be Ralph in this book. But yeah, this book goes through the phone guy, and that makes sense because phone guy is a character we spent a great deal of time with, but have not gotten to know super great. And this book fixes that. first and foremost, this book is told from his perspective. It tells the story of Ralph and his last week at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. You know, the week where he, you know, canonically dies in FNAF 1 and is never heard from again. But this book actually explains that, well, that is the canon ending. Like, that is the bonus playthrough from this book. That is like an obvious no-brainer spoiler for this book. It does explain, this book also goes into a lot of detail about, you know, his life, why he decided to work at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, what kind of person he is, and also explains quite a bit about, you know, both A, Fazbear Entertainment's inner workings, but also B, it also explains a couple of major lore reveals that have been left hanging for a long time. For example, Ralph implies a lot of things about the Bite of 87 in this book as one of the big reveals that comes out of it. Like, he implies a lot of things and allow theorists to finally, you know, put together the gaps about, oh, the Bite of 87, we now know what happens, or at least we think we can at least 99% infer what happened from this book with evidence we had from the games already. So, yeah, that's like one of the first major reveals. But yeah, we also find out Ralph has a daughter. Her name is Coppelia, and also we find out that even though the obvious canon ending as seen in FNAF 1 is that he dies, the book implies that he is actually on his last week before retirement. So, well, the book establishes that it's his last week before retirement. So, regardless, and it also establishes that he's been with the franchise since its early days, likely in the 80s. So, yeah, it implies that regardless of whether or not he did die in FNAF 1, Ralph was always going to be gone by the end of that week. He was going to retire. He was going to spend more time with his daughter. He was never going to be a permanent person. He was going to finish up his last week in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and ultimately that was going to be the end. So yeah, unfortunately, after that he would not be a, you know, security guard anymore. But that's what I like about. Obviously, that's not in fact pan out, because obviously the canon ending is he dies. But obviously, I do like the idea that, you know, he was going to retire, and I do like that this finally does give us some insight into Phone Guy. That was something I didn't think I needed, but now Phone Guy is an actual character to me now. He has a name. He has an officially described personality. He has family. And I do like that from a premise, but obviously this book does go in a little bit more, which, essentially, the main thing is to take away from this book is that you should never leave the office. That is the main thing to take away from this book, because Ralph does quite a bit, actually. He wanders over, he goes in and out of, obviously it's because, you know, obviously, it's a choose-your-own adventure novel, so obviously having Ralph hunker down in the office for the entire 5 nights of the game would not be very entertaining. But Ralph proceeds to leave. He proceeds to do a bunch of, obviously because he's a security guard, he proceeds to do a series of odd jobs to do, you know, perimeter checks around the building and a whole bunch of other stuff. And obviously the animatronics, you know, they find him in a lot of the endings, because, you know, he's wandering around, you know, climbing through the air vents to, you know, go to places he can't get to because the animatronics are there. He goes to fix, you know, various light bulbs and other things. He checks out a broken window in one of the party rooms, which has merit in the quote unquote good main ending. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on inside of, you know, Ralph's journey through the books. But also more to the point, it's also established that the reason it's not a good idea to leave the office is because apparently the animatronics are smart enough to figure out that the cameras watch the entire building. And in one of the endings, if Ralph isn't in there and the animatronics are able to get into the office, they're able to log on to the cameras and start looking for him. So yeah, that establishes that, yeah, you should never leave the office, because you can use the cameras to check for the animatronics, but that is a two-way street. If they get into the office and you're not there, they're looking for you. So yeah, that would explain why they hunkered down the office. Obviously it's a gameplay decision. Obviously you're not supposed to leave the office, but the book does give a canon explanation for why you should always hunker down in the office and not leave, which is that the animatronics can find you using the cameras. But also as to why the night guards don't leave in the middle of the night, the book actually explains that too, and it's actually the main story of the book actually. That's at multiple points you can try and leave, but ultimately what happens is we find out that the animatronics can also leave Freddy's to an extent, and they will find you regardless of how you get out. They will find you, and they will follow you either back to your house, or Chica at one point is just wandering through the wilderness and she finds you, or a whole bunch of other different ways. But they can find you outside the pizzeria, and there is no way to actually escape the pizzeria until morning. So yeah, that's an important thing that comes out of the books, which I do quite like. So, yeah, kind of getting into kind of the story. Obviously, we have the canon ending where Ralph leaves his messages for you during his last week in office, and then he eventually dies. And the book, and that's the bonus playthrough. Actually, you go through the bonus playthrough. The game explains the book actually goes on to give him ideas of that, like, oh, here's what actually happened during that week, to kind of give an idea of, oh, it gives more context to what's going on. But if you play through the main playthrough, obviously there's nothing of note that happens. Obviously Ralph gets scared out of its wits for an entire week. He wanders around the office. He does a bunch of jobs that he isn't really qualified for. He actually fixes Bonnie on night 3, which is interesting. And also night 4 is probably the funniest out of the whole book, because Ralph comes in that morning, and the animatronics are just tearing up the joint. They're just throwing a whole ass rave in the middle of the pizzeria, and Ralph is like, well, this is just unacceptable. I gotta figure out how to fix this without alerting the animatronics that I'm here. So he has to go figure out how to shut down the building so that the animatronics actually return back to their stages. And it's just really funny, because there's just this visual of just Chica strutting down the aisle doing the chicken dance, and just the animatronics just going hog wild in the main party room. And I find that hilarious. It's such a great visual, and it's so funny when you first read the book. But yeah, you are not prepared for how funny that night is, because it's completely out of nowhere, and it's great. But yeah, ultimately in the main playthrough, of course, Ralph, obviously, he finishes his 5 nights. He goes home. He retires. He has a happy night. That is the quote-unquote, that is the non-canon ending. That is the quote-unquote bad ending, where Ralph just, does the bare minimum that's expected of him that week, and he goes home. But if you go off the beaten path, there is another ending and a far more interesting line of thinking here, which is that in the book, obviously I just talked about the 2 main playthroughs. One of the main playthroughs involves Ralph as he's going through the building doing his checks. He can discover that there's a series of clues leading to him to discover that a woman he previously interviewed but ultimately did not get the job, Brown and Light, actually was in the building while he was there during his final week, and she ultimately goes on to become an investigative reporter. But if you follow the thread, it's real that A, she died, which is why she's not in FNAF 1. Kind of explain that, the fact that, obviously FNAF 1 was very limited in its characters and scope, so obviously, because it was, it was meant to be Scott's quote-unquote last game, and then it spawned a whole franchise, so yeah, Scott, when he made the game, had a very limited scope for what the book was supposed to be. So, for what the game was supposed to be. But here he can actually expand on the story and give some much needed context. We find out that Brown and Light, she was there, she ultimately broke into Freddy's to try and investigate something and died. But if you go through the book and get what you need to actually access a phone call at one point, because she leaves you a voice message similar to how Ralph leaves you one. She reveals that she is in fact actually, that she goes on to reveal that there was a little bit more about the animatronics and how they work. And it is, and you can also find this out for yourself as playing it through Ralph, but essentially, it is revealed that the animatronics, the reason that they're able to roam around the house at night is because they have a charging pad built into their stages, which allows them to fill up their battery during the night and then wander around during the day to greet with guests. However, because of the fact that Ralph is leaving, and because, you know, the animatronics were possessed by the murder victims of William Afton and are actual children, they don't fully grasp the concept that you're leaving, and kind of pissed off that you get to leave, and they don't. They don't understand that Ralph is retiring. They decide to take revenge on you by building up their charge enough to actually leave the pizzeria for a long enough period to go to your house, kill Capella, and then take as revenge for Ralph leaving them, because they don't understand that, you know, that Ralph, someone who's been there almost as more longer than they have, gets to leave, and they are not happy about that. So if Ralph goes, and of course if Ralph figures this out, it triggers a night 6 playthrough in the book where he gets to go back, figure out how to shut down the animatronics, and then he dies the Golden Freddy, unfortunately. But yeah, this episode. But yeah, ultimately that's how the bonus playthrough ends. And then as you're playing through the bonus playthrough, you can of course pick up Browning's phone, which then leads you to the true ending in the bonus playthrough, where Ralph leaves his messages in the for the FNAF 1 night guard to find. And then of course he dies at the end of the week. So that is of course not that surprising. That is how the game actually plays out in FNAF 1. So that's how you get to the bonus playthrough. But it is interesting, like seeing everything from Ralph's perspective. We find out a little, and obviously, and of course, we do find out why he of course works there in the begin with. I don't think I've talked about that yet, but he does work. Actually, I definitely haven't, but we do find out a little bit more about why Ralph actually works at Freddy's. Turns out Freddy's is actually his quote-unquote dream job, and he loves working at Freddy's so much that he actually turns a blind eye to a lot of their shady dealings and a lot of their shady past, which of course does work out for him, but which of course that doesn't work out as, you know, great as you would hope. Obviously, Freddy's has a lot of shady stuff. Obviously, there was a murder that happened there. He turns a blind eye to that. And then there's the Bite of 87. We talked about how he alludes to that. He just kind of brushes past that idea of like, yeah, that happens, but this shouldn't have happened, and it's unfortunate. But yeah, he just kind of brushes past that a little bit. But obviously, he's very disappointed that it happened at all, which does give some context into what actually happened with the Bite of 87. I mentioned that, but and obviously obviously this just causes him to, you know, it's not necessarily, it's just him being like, oh, well, this doesn't roll my enthusiasm for working at Freddy's. It's one of the best places to work. I love working here. And establishes that he's maybe a little bit naive as well, which is why, he kind of turns a blind eye to it. That he obviously likes working at Freddy's. And that conflicts with the fact that Freddy's is, in fact, a terrible place to work. So that belief does not really hold up with Ralph. But of course, we also find out a little bit more about, you know, FNAF's inner workings here, which is that's obviously FNAF, which are obviously, we find, first and foremost, obviously because it's a prequel, we obviously because it's a prequel and because we know that, you know, that Ralph is also a major character in FNAF 2 and 3, even though he doesn't physically appear in those because he dies in FNAF 1. In FNAF 2 and 3, which are sort of a prequel, or at least the phone guy's messages in FNAF 3 are set before FNAF 1. We find out that Ralph, of course, what Ralph has done for the company is, you know, record a series of messages and other things. And we find out that Fazbear Entertainment has, in fact, changed some of his messages because he went into a little bit too much detail about what actually goes on there. And case in point, we see the FNAF 2 phone calls in this book, and they are different from how they're shown in the actual, you know, game. There's dialogue omitted and missing, with Ralph pointing out that, you know, he remembers this message. He remembers it being a little bit longer. So yeah, it implies that Fazbear Entertainment does in fact changes messages to better suit the fact that, you know, he is not allowed to go into too much detail about what goes on. But ultimately, this is a phenomenal book. This book has a lot of lore reveals and other things that are very useful for theory crafting. And if you're a theorist, I recommend picking it up. It's a really good book. Although I'm sure a lot of people have in fact picked it up already, but because I'm doing this super late. But yeah, this came out last year. I recommend picking it up though if you are new to the series either way, because if you like FNAF 1, this book gives a lot of insight into what's going on behind FNAF 1, as well as to a lesser extent 2 and 3. So yeah, if you like the phone guy and want to know what his story is, this book's a great book to pick up. So yeah, in case, that is of course going to do it for today's today's review of the book. But onward to the next review, which is okay. So this next book I'm not going to be a little bit more brief on, because with it we have arrived at Scott's favorite child of 7. Scott is a father of 6. That is on his Wikipedia page. Technically 7, because we find out that his favorite child is in fact Into the Pit, because he made another re-release of Into the Pits for one of these interactive novels. It's called Return to the Pit, and the story is pretty much, this is actually probably the most well-known story Scott has made, because it both, not only was it in Fazbear Frights, the original release of the game, of the original release of short story novels that I talked about at the start, but it was also a very popular, very good video game, and it was which also adapted the story. So now this is the 3rd time we've had this story, and it is interesting. So I think the best way to describe it is that obviously I'm not going to go in more detail about the plot, because you guys already know the plot if you've read the original story or you played the game, and I'm assuming a lot of you played the game. But essentially, the story revolves around Oswald. His relationship with his father isn't super great, and he spends a lot of time alone at Jeff's Pizza, the local pizzeria that he goes to, because his one and only friend left, because the town that he lives in is going through a bit of a economic crisis, because the mill that a lot of people work at shut down, and kind of at one point being a little bit mad at his dad, he decides to climb into the old ball pit at Jeff's Pizza, winds up getting transported back to the events of the missing children incident, and then this bizarre creature thing referred to only as the Yellow Rabbit, which is sort of pseudo-based on William Afton, but not entirely clear what it is, follows him home, attacks his dad, replaces his dad, and Oswald has to figure out how to get his real dad back. So, yeah, that's essentially the premise. Again, if you've read the story, you know how the story goes. However, this one is a little bit more interesting, and as I said, this book is a little bit of an odd man out in that, obviously, FNAF Into the Pit is not technically in the same continuity as the game. It is set in Fazbear Frights, which does embellish a little bit of things. It's not, obviously, first and foremost, Fazbear Frights is delightfully weird. I like that series a lot because it's delightfully weird. But, essentially, Fazbear Frights is very clear, is not meant to be, canon to the games, because there's a lot of bizarre lore and other things that are in those books that are canon, but don't feel like they should be very, very well associated. They should be completely associated with the series. This, however, is kind of different in that a lot of these books are kind of pseudo connected to the games. Obviously, we already talked about V.I.P, which is obviously connected to the main, which is obviously connected to the main story, to connects Tales from the Pizzaplex to the the Steel Wool games. That is what that book serves. And you have The Week Before, which is very clearly connected to the games because it was made with FNAF 1 in mind and is designed to tell the story of the phone guy. So, obviously very important to the game. But this one is a little bit, and then one other book we have left is Escape the Pizzaplex, which again is connected to the games, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But Return to the Pit is a little bit more different in that Return to the Pit was never really connected to the games in any real way. Well, rather, Into the Pit wasn't. Obviously, you got a video game, but that's more of a spin-off than it is a main entry. So, and also, I do find it appropriate that that two of these are connected to the 10th anniversary in some way, because FNAF Into the Pit was made for the 10th anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's. This book was released released Christmas of last year as a companion for that game. So, yeah, it was meant. So yeah, it's a little bit weird as to where Into the Pit falls. I think with this book, they may be trying to bring it into the main canon, because it does obviously depict the missing children incident, which is a key event in the Five Nights at Freddy's series. So I'm leaning on the fence on the side of this is probably connected to the game somehow, and we just don't know how that is yet. But obviously, because it depicts the missing children incident, it is a very important book that Scott has decided. It's a very important story that Scott has decided to release twice. So yeah, it's obviously very important to the obviously because the story is important to Five Nights at Freddy's. It's very important. So it makes sense that if they were re-releasing this book again, that it has to be kind of aligned with the games, because all of the other books work this way. It's weird that this one doesn't. So yeah, but essentially the premise is obviously, as I said, the premise is very simple, but it is interesting in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, Into the Pit, it's not clear if it's time travel or memory, magic, or whatever. Obviously, the Fazbear Frights books, they go into a little bit more detail about what actually is happening with the ball pit, kind of explaining that it's kind of sort of a, the books do establish that, haunted objects are created when strong emotions are attached to them, with, moments of pain and suffering being, of course, the strongest, and those kinds of emotions are what ultimately stick and make the most dangerous haunted objects. And obviously, the ball pit is implied to be one of those, and that, and obviously the yellow rabbit, which is the main antagonist of that story, is implied to be connected to the ball pit somehow, but I'm not entirely sure for myself. Obviously, people have kind of, speculated on that. Obviously, people have tried to figure out how Into the Pit is connected, how the yellow rabbit connects, especially with this book, which considering it's kind of feels like the odd man out, feels a little bit connected to the games. And but yeah, it is interesting. First and foremost, this is actually the shortest of the 3 books, because it's adapting a short story, which wasn't very long to begin with. So it's adapting a short story and adding a bunch of new endings to it. So obviously, it's the shortest of these books that we're going to review today. But yeah, Return to the Pit obviously does not kind of make it clear what's going on, because there is evidence for both, dream, sort of a dream logic, but also a sort of, connected to the game in some way, kind of, the kind of, real world time travel kind of stuff. For example, in multiple endings, Oswald will see the yellow rabbit, and he can follow it around. And if he does follow it around, the yellow rabbit gains this sort of dreamlike euphoric control over Oswald, and Oswald feels in this very happy, lighthearted state of just, oh, the bunny knows everything. I'll trust the bunny. The bunny feels like a friend. But in actuality, the bunny is trying to, kill him. So yeah, it's very clear that that the yellow rabbit has some sort of control over him, at least while in the ball pit. But then there's also multiple endings that imply that it might actually be time travel. First and foremost, obviously I've talked about the main story. An alternate story you can go through is actually a really funny one, because it's also ultimately it's Avengers meets It, and it's very, very funny and interesting, but it does give some additional context. For example, it is revealed that Chip, a minor character in the original story who shows up at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and then is never heard from again, because Oswald does not go back to Freddy's, is a major character in that ending, where he is now, around in his 40s. And he is of course A, aware that time travel is a thing, but also B, that the yellow rabbit is a thing, and has assembled a team to try and destroy it. Which of course goes about as well as you expect, because it's revealed that the yellow rabbit is the one leading the strike team to kill itself, which does give this idea of like, oh, the yellow rabbit can just manipulate memories and do whatever it wants. But yeah, that does seem to confirm that there's time travel. But also, during one of the endings, which is very similar to the hobo ending from the video game, you can actually just leave Freddy's at one point. And if you do so, it actually extends on that ending by revealing that once Oswald leaves, he is suddenly rubber banded back to the present, and he is suddenly 40. And it is very clear that there is some sort of time travel involved in that, because there's no other way he would be 40. And also seems to imply that the time travel is localized entirely within Jeff's kitchen, which, fair enough. But it is, yeah, okay, but yeah. Essentially, what happens is obviously Oswald he gets rubber banded back to the present. He does not, of course, get to tell anybody that he is actually Oswald. He's just like, oh, but I'm Oswald. It's me, but I'm 40 now. Please listen to me. Obviously, he's not, obviously his dad and Jeff don't believe him, so he's forced to go under a new identity while a massive search party goes out to try and find, quote-unquote, Oswald, even though he's Oswald. But yeah, there is evidence of that, obviously the connected thing. And also, we do find out a little bit more about established characters. I talked about Chip already, but it's revealed that Gabrielle, who is a major character in all versions of this story, because, she is the first friend Oswald meets after his old friend moved away. She is revealed to actually be Chip's daughter in this book, which is fascinating. And also the book implies that you were supposed to go meet her at school, because otherwise she tags along with her dad to do this raid of Jeff's Pizza that he's trying to help out with, and obviously it does not go well because the Yellow Rabbit again can disguise itself using memory magic or whatever. But yeah, of course it does. It's clear that you were supposed to play through the book normally and go on your little adventure. But there's also just multiple endings where obviously you die, and where obviously you die to a bunch of different things. Obviously the Yellow Rabbit finds you in a bunch of different ways, but there's also a couple of game over endings where Oswald decides not to actually go back to Jeff's Pizza after the first night because he has a weird dream and realizes the pit might be bad news, so he decides to not go back. And obviously that sounds like it would be a good ending, but obviously if you don't go back to the pit, there's of course a very interesting issue where obviously because Into the Pit is how Oswald fixes his relationship with his father. Because the story doesn't happen, Oswald's and his father's relationship just deteriorates and gradually gets worse and worse until eventually Oswald just moves, never speaks to his father again, and then it's too late because his dad eventually passes away from old age. So, yeah, unfortunately there's no reconciliation there at all, and obviously there's a couple different endings where Oswald dies to the Yellow Rabbit. But like in the game, there's a couple of endings where Oswald can die to the Yellow Rabbit if he isn't careful. So, yeah, it does expand on that. But also, there's a couple of interesting endings here. First and foremost, obviously because it's the first story in the game, there is an overarching story about a weird animatronic called Eleanor that who is established to be the main antagonist of the Fazbear Fright stories, but and she is in fact connected to the ball pit in some way, if you've read the books. But obviously, she is not in this first story. She's not in Into the Pit. Return to the Pit fixes that because there is a game over you can get where you can go through you can find her, but if you in the same ending where you choose to leave the pizzeria, you can find her in the basement, or at least something that is meant to be her. And then she and the Yellow Rabbit tag team you when you die. But it is interesting that Eleanor is here. It is interesting that Eleanor is here, or at least implied to be. It's implied to be her because the description is similar, but not 100% exact. But it is implied that she's here. But also, there is a bonus playthrough. Of course, after you play through the main story, and this is actually really fun because it does actually connect back to the video game again. If you go through the story, you can find two halves. You can also start with this. But there's two halves of a golden token that you can find throughout the story. And if you put it together, you can put it into a special arcade machine. And if you go through that arcade machine for your bonus playthrough, you are transported to a fictionalized version of the Into the Pit video game. It's not 100% exact. It's more of an 8-bit style minigame than an actual, Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit, which isn't 8-bit, but it's similar enough in that Oswald's transported to this pixelated world where he is trapped in a pixelated version of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and he has to save all the kids. So it's very similar, and obviously, it works on video game logic in that you cannot in fact die. You will be teleported back to the arcade machine every single time you die, barring some special exceptions. There's one death in here that's more important than the others. I'm not sure why that would be. I'm going to chalk it up to probably a re-release error, or there's some lore significance, because this book was actually re-released. This is not the original cover that it came with. It was actually released with a different design for the Yellow Rabbit on the cover. So it is a little bit different, but And then there's also a really funny ending where you can claim you have a map. There's no way to legitimately get this game over because the game knows, and the book knows this, because it will actually yell at you for cheating, and then the book crashes and you have to go back to the beginning. So there's a joke in here about how you can about making fun of people who kind of try to cheat these books by sticking your finger in and going through all the different endings to be like, oh, let's go through all the different endings, and it actually yells at you for that. I like that a lot, but ultimately, yeah, you can go through the book, and similar to this, you can actually stop the missing children incident. You can actually go through. You can rescue the kids from the yellow rabbit and give them cake, kind of similar to the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 3. And if you do it this way, an ending similar to the 3-star ending from Into the Pit plays out, where Jeff is now successful and happy. He has a massive series of arcade machines. He has an entire arcade library, and he's doing well for himself. And ultimately, you're transported to a timeline where the missing children incident never happens. But that, which of course does imply that there is some sort of time travel involved in the story. But this is also not the only place where this happens, because you can actually grandfather yourself if you wind up doing this ending in the main playthrough which is the incorrect way to do it. You can actually, for example, you can actually buy a flashlight from the price counter during the main playthrough of the story, and if you have it with you when you follow the yellow rabbit at one particular point, you can flash it in the eyes, and then it accidentally kills itself, because it gets blinded, it stumbles into a bunch of stuff, it winds up killing itself by accident in this confusion, and this ultimately results in a timeline where, obviously, Oswald is still in the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He can't at this point, so it creates a paradox where he accidentally kills the yellow rabbit, which prevents the missing children incident from happening. But this also means that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza never closes down, which means that obviously that Jeff's Pizza never opens, which means Oswald never goes to Jeff's Pizza for the summer, which means he never goes back in time through the ball pit to actually go to the 1985 Jeff's Pizza, which means he's never able to kill the yellow rabbit, which means that the missing children incident is never prevented, and this results in a grandfather paradox where Oswald strands himself in the past and he cannot get out because the ball pit is gone. He is trapped in 1985 Freddy's forever. So, yeah, it's a very long-winded explanation, but essentially, Oswald grandfathers himself by trying to prevent the missing children incident early. So, it's a very interesting ending. There is, of course, one last ending I want to go through, if I can find it. In this book, there is in fact a storyline you can go through where if you play through this game on easy mode or you buy it at the prize counter, you can get a pair of yellow bunny ears, and there's multiple points where you can put them on, and this is one of the endings you can get. I'm just gonna read it out loud to you guys. You pull the ears out from the depth of the bag and hold them to your hands. You don't remember them looking quite as ridiculous before. You suppose that in 1985 things tend to look less so because, well, everything is over the top. The bright neon, the huge hairstyles, the wild makeup choices that some of the girls had with the bright blue eyeshadow and super pink lipstick. Everything is so gaudy and fake looking, so a pair of yellow fuzzy bunny ears are practically understated. And, well, when you're surrounded by flashing games and a wall of prizes, it's kind of just blends together. Anyway, even if you feel like a little silly doing this, you made a decision, you might as well try. Here goes, quite literally nothing. You put them on and feel stupid. Really, really stupid. Something sharp on each side of the plastic band just by the top of the ear suddenly pierces into your skull, clamping onto it hard. It's shocking and sudden, and you should cry out in pain, but for some reason you actually feel quite relaxed. Really relaxed. Super relaxed. It's like the stabbing into your flesh is a welcoming feeling, something you realize that you've always needed and now finally have. You feel good. You feel very bunny. You are one with being a bunny. Yes, this is right. This is good. You wander out of your room like you're floating, like your feet don't even touch the ground. You're looking for the rabbit and you head to your parents' room. You discover the rabbit lying on the bed on top of the covers with Mom next to it. They're watching some kind of documentary on bunnies on the TV. Oh, look, Mom is wearing bunny ears too. You go and sit between them. Mom gives you a little squeeze, and you'll sink back into the pillows next to her. This is exactly what you wanted. To sit with your buddy family watching your bunny show. You look at the rabbit who looks at you, and even though its expression doesn't change, you know it's happy too. Family night. Together you will all watch the show forever. So, yeah. That is just a whole bunch of absurdity and nonsense. And I unironically love this ending because, as I said, Fazbear Frights is very weird. This ending perfectly connects to that series perfectly. Because that ending shows up a couple of different ways. And also there's a couple of different versions of that ending. They're all weird. They're weird. And it is very bizarre, and I love it. But yeah, that's ultimately Return to the Pit. Return to the Pit is, well, as I said, Return to the Pit, obviously if you've read through the story before, this is obviously Scott's favorite child and the story he's clearly most proud of, because this is the third time now he's released the story in some form. Actually, a couple of times now if you count because there's the graphic novels. I forgot about the graphic novels. This is the third re-release we've gotten of this in some form because it also appears in the graphic novels. So, yeah, he's re-released the story 3 separate times. It's clear he's proud of it, and I don't blame him. It's a good story. It's a very lore significant story. I don't blame him for being proud of it, but also, Scott, you need to slow down a little bit. This is the third re-release you've given this story. Like, I like this story, but this is 3 is too much. 3 is just too much. But in any case, that said, if you want a companion for the video game, do recommend it. I recommend picking it up. It's a good book. But I just don't think it needed to be released, 3 separate times. That is my main complaint with the book. Not necessarily with the book itself. A lot of the lore reveals and its connective tissue to possibly the games and the story it spawned from are very important, but I didn't need this book. I didn't need a third version of this story. I'll be perfectly honest, I did not need a third version of the story. I've already got the video game, which is marvelous, and I've got the original release on my shelf, which is also pretty good. And I don't have the graphic novels, because I think they were made by somebody who's kind of problematic, but, or at least the artist is. But yeah, I did not need a re-release of this book. And I'm sure a couple of FNAF fans probably like having a new version of the story, and I do, but we didn't need this many re-releases of it. But in case, yeah, if you like, it's a good book though. I do highly recommend it, even if I am making fun of the fact that it got re-released a whole bunch. In a bunch of different forms, might I add. So, yeah, obviously, if you've experienced one story of Into the Pit, you've experienced them all, but I do recommend it for the new content. Obviously, I skimmed over a lot of the stuff. There's most of what I talk about, though, is the new content, unfortunately. Like, a lot of the main story is just, it's just the main story, but with new game overs added in, and a new sub-story. And that's it, but that's all it needs to be like the definitive version of Into the Pit. And I do like and that's wild considering there's also the video game, which also does some definitive things with Into the Pit. Do recommend all versions of the story though, if you have to pick it up. And I do recommend this book for the new, story revelations and other things. If you like Into the Pit, either because you read the original story or you played the video game, recommend it. But in case, that's going to do it for today, for this review. So onward to the next and final review, which is... And last but certainly not least, we have the final book in the series, Five Nights at Freddy's Escape the Pizzaplex. So this book is, again, I'm kind of commenting on this, with maybe exception of Return to the Pit. All these books are seemingly connected to the main series in some way, as this book, as continuing what we said about V.I.P. earlier, this book is set in the Pizzaplex and is a prequel to Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. It follows Cassie and Gregory and kind of sort of elaborates on the relationship a little bit. We'll get to that in a minute. But essentially the story revolves around, Cassie and Gregory spending a week in the Pizzaplex when it is being scheduled to being cleaned. And there are some interesting implications that come out because of that. So, first and foremost, the book kind of establishes a lot. First and foremost, this book is surprisingly linear for a choose-your-own-adventure novel. The first 3 nights, you can pretty much all like similar loops. You can't die in the first night at all, so there's no endings there to find. The second night, sort of same thing, but they continue on with this idea. That's it's essentially the idea is that the entire story is that it establishes that Gregory and Cassidy are quote unquote best friends. Gregory, well, specifically Cassidy is Gregory's best human friend. Obviously, he and Freddy are, established in this book to be extremely close with one another. But essentially, the story goes on that Gregory has a very, very nasty habit of pranking Cassie, which gets progressively worse throughout the book, and has some interesting things in regards to it. So, first and foremost, the book definitely revolves around the idea of, it's a little bit hard to explain, but essentially what the book does is kind of shed some light on Gregory's character and some interesting notes from Security Breach. First and foremost, if you're not familiar with the story of Security Breach, although it is the one that blew up and made the series mainstream again, so I would imagine a lot of people would be aware of it. But essentially, Security Breach follows Gregory around the Pizzaplex as he, explores with fun time with Glamrock Freddy in tow, as he tries to figure out how to investigate all the different ways to get out of the Pizzaplex so that he can leave. And based on how much or how little of the game you do, you can get you get a 1 to 3 star ending. Yeah, there's a lot. So, and essentially, what I should probably mention, Security Breach is probably one of the most confusing and difficult games to analyze from a lore perspective, because it is a massive game with a lot of things to hide in. And it's also adding to the fact that, Steel Wool, there was a bit of miscommunication during the development of Security Breach. Case in point, the climax of the game is very different from what Scott envisioned it to be. Also, there's the issue that this game came out, but a lot of what was elaborated in this game was meant to be a thing that was expanded on in Tales from the Pizzaplex, which were not out at the time. So there was a lot of strange stuff going on in Security Breach that only got elaborated as the books were coming out, and then that led directly into the DLC, into the free DLC for the game. But then it also had to connect to an AR game that was not made by Steel Wool, so they had to try and incorporate parts of that story into their story. And overall, it's kind of eye-opening how kind of okay Security Breach is. Because Security Breach, I know she mentioned, there were some buggy problems with it. Like, I'll admit that. Some people do defend it, but it does have its fair share of problems. I'll openly admit that. But, yes, but it's a fun game. It's the first open world FNAF game, probably going to be the last, considering, that it was very big with a lot of things to hide stuff in, and that confused a lot of people, again. But it did its job decently well for a story. I think it did. Yeah, essentially there was one of the mysteries was, this mystery of Patient 46, how it's connected to Vanny as the main villain of that game, and all those other things. This book does kind of elaborate. Well, first and foremost, Tales from the Pizzaplex did elaborate on some stuff, but this further elaborates by expanding on Gregory's character. First and foremost, in the game, Gregory is very hesitant to crawl inside of Glamrock Freddy's chest cavity, because he thinks he'll be, mangled horribly by the machinery inside. Whereas in this book, it's revealed to be an old habit of his. And also that he and Freddy are fast friends. So, or at the very least, and also establishes that, Gregory's a bit of a hacker, which does further elaborate on some stuff from, the game, as we know Patient 46 was a bit of a hacker. And also, it seems to give Gregory's role in the story a little bit more weight. As I mentioned that the entire story is that Gregory is about pulling pranks. This elaborates that Gregory's pranks are borderline dangerous. And what we find out is that it seems that Gregory specifically picks people because that's the expected. He was working with Bloodstrap, and then something happened that caused his mind to be reset somehow, which this book does give credence to, because again, Gregory used to climb inside of Glamrock Freddy all the time, whereas in this book, whereas in Security Breach, that is not the case. He's very hesitant to do so, but eventually gets back into the habit. So, it's very clear that his mind got reset somehow. But this also seems to go into a little bit more detail about what Gregory's role is under Glitch Trap, which is that he seems to target kids that don't have many friends and kind of becomes their only friend, which is very interesting because here's the thing. Cassie points out very obviously that Gregory has a very nasty habit of pulling pranks, and these pranks get worse as the book goes on. It starts off with him trying to actually scare Cassie by climbing inside of Glamrock Freddy and chasing her around in the first chapter. He eventually finds Cassie no matter what. So, which is what I said. That's how the book opens. But then, as the book kind of goes on, it kind of opens up a little bit more. The second book, this time, the openings 2 chapters are about, you know, Cassie and Gregory playing hide and seek in the Mega Pizzaplex after hours. But in night 2, he has Montgomery Gator do it, and Montgomery Gator is established to be unstable. He glitches out at random times, has random spasms as he's looking for Cassie. And it's very clear that something is going on with Montgomery Gator, and sure enough, he can actually kill you if you go through the wrong chapter in this. And then starting in night 3 is where the book opens up with a new threat, the reagent. This, which is appropriate for a chemical spraying robot, because the entire thing is that it's designed to, you know, clean organic matter from the Pizzaplex. But it doesn't make sense somewhat from a chemistry perspective, because a reagent is used to test a chemical reaction. It is not a type of chemical. So yeah, it's interesting that that's what the name is. But of course, night 3, the reagent is actually from night 3 onwards. The reagent actually roams around the Pizzaplex. It sprays various nozzles. And we've established that in the book, Gregory has Glamrock Freddy kidnap Cassie and have her and stash her in the kitchen where he claims she'll be quote unquote safe. But in that chapter, most of the bad endings are, regardless of how she does it, Cassie winds up getting sprayed by the reagent, and it causes a burning sensation in her lungs and everything else that causes her to pass out. And the only way to quote-unquote survive the ending is to hold off the reagent long enough that Roxanne Wolf can come find you. At which point night 4 continues, where Gregory is once again up to his old tricks, and his tricks get increasingly morbid, where he fakes his own death, and Roxanne Wolf is seen roaming around, is also helping, you know, Cassie get around. But rather interestingly, the reagent is also roaming around and it can still kill you. So if you go through the wrong ending, half of them results in you dying to the reagent, which is interesting. And then the final ending is, of course, Cassie, after finding out that Roxanne Wolf pranked her, seemingly against her will, as we find out in night 5. They then go to find a computer terminal to fix her and fix what's wrong with her, because Gregory did something to her programming that causes her to turn hostile, similar to how Montgomery Gator was hostile. And at the end of the book, if you successfully do that, you then have a showdown with the reagent, which is now locked onto your location, seemingly because of something Gregory did. But of course that is it, which of course is interesting, because in the final 2 nights are where the main bulk of the second playthrough is. If you successfully do the second playthrough, which isn't canon because the Roxanne Wolf has Montgomery Gator's claws, which is not the upgrade she gives in Security Breach. She can fight back against the reagent if you complete your second playthrough, and it's revealed that Gregory was waiting outside the Pizzaplex the entire time, which implies that he could have stopped the reagent and didn't. So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack with this book. There's quite a bit. So, yeah, first and foremost, the book implies that he doesn't try to stop the reagent. And we know for a fact that the reagent can, you know, gas you with chemicals, knock you out. But it seems to imply that Gregory plays defense. for Shrek, whereas Vandy plays offense. So it seems that Gregory is responsible for actually finding and abducting kids, and that the reagent helps him pull that off to an extent, because the reagent sprays you with chemicals, which we know can kill you, but before that it knocks you out, and it can knock you out for a whole day, which is established in the book. So it is implied that Gregory has done some. I don't know. It's implied. There's a lot of implications about Gregory that I personally am not mentally equipped enough to unpack. But this book has some interesting revelations about Gregory. Like, that is the main takeaway from this book. Obviously, I can't recommend the book with full marks because it is very linear until about the end of the book. About on night 4 is when it actually opens up. But because I'll admit, a lot of the endings feel very samey at the start, and then as the book goes on, it gradually opens up more and more, and you get more options and endings. So, but yeah, it seems that he does this by, finding kids that are lonely children and then wearing down their fight or flight response with dangerous quote-unquote pranks designed to make them question, well, is this really a prank, or is this an actual dangerous life or death situation thing? And that's exactly what happens with Cassie. She is obviously there's the whole issue with Montgomery Gator, who of course starts glitching out uncontrollably and starts spasming. And it's clear that he's dangerous, but nobody really, but Cassie is like, oh, it might be a prank, might not be a prank, I don't know. And this line of logic continues with the reagent as well, because Gregory, during all of this, he, first and foremost, he stops Montgomery Gator, and then claims on night 3 that the reagent is a real threat that Cassie needs to take seriously. But since, Gregory has put her in quote-unquote mortal danger twice now, technically speaking, Montgomery Gator, he couldn't control, but could stop. And then obviously, Glamrock Freddy was under his control the entire time. When the reagent comes along, Cassie's like, no, there's no way this is a real thing. Has to be some sort of prank. Until she sees it in person, at which point it's already cornered her in the kitchen and she has to hide from it. And then on night 4, again, the reagent is a threat in this night, so it's continuing to go around spraying the building, and you can run into it during one of its cleanings. Cassie, the way you continue the night is by running into Gregory, who fakes a heated argument with Glamrock Freddy. Freddy then pretends to kill Gregory. And then he also hacks into Roxy to make it feel like, oh, Roxy's in on it too. Everybody's in on it. It's all a big joke. And this, of course, causes Cassie to become, of course, very hurt because Roxanne Wolf is her favorite animatronic. I can relate to that. Then finally on night 5, as she's trying to go and fit, as Cassie's trying to fix Roxanne Wolf and fix her programming. Not only is she under constant threat of Roxanne Wolf turning on her, and if you accidentally go down the wrong path, that's exactly what happens. But you can also, go when you finally get there. Gregory has turned this whole fix what's wrong with Roxanne Wolf situation into a game. You're gonna either play rock, paper, scissors, or you have to pick a color with her. But either way, Gregory has turned it into a game. Only one of which is actually the right answer to actually defuse Gregory's programming. At which point the reagent comes back to life and tries to kill Cassie. And in the bonus ending, Gregory is revealed that he could have stopped the reagent. As I said, he could have stopped the reagent. He stopped Montgomery Gator when he was going to kill Cassie, but he doesn't. He is outside and then plays it off as yet another game that they were playing, and wonders what game they'll play tomorrow. So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack with this book. Believe it or not, despite how surprisingly linear it is, there's a lot to unpack with this book, and it is definitely one of my favorites as well. Like, definitely, if I had to rank them, I would definitely rank, I would have to rank, I would have to rank them the week before, Escape the Pizzaplex, Return to the Pit, and then, obviously, V.I.P, because V.I.P is, the tutorial version of it. And it doesn't have a whole lot in terms of lore reels, but it does have some fun. It is still a fun story. It's just, compared to the other three, which have some lore reveals and expand on their stories that they're based on. Yeah, that one's kind of a weakness. But overall, I like all 4 of these books. So yeah, these 3 will run you about $60. So they're not super. Well, actually, I think close to 40. Actually, because it's 12 for a paperback book, and then you just have to buy 3 of them, and then VIP is free. And then obviously there's the box set where you can buy it. It's probably gonna be around $40, and then VIP comes included as a physical book in that set. Again, not sure if I'm gonna buy all the books again just so I can get VIP as a physical book. Maybe if VIP is available on its own as a physical book, a physical book, maybe I'll pick it up and pay like the $12 that it winds up being. But overall, I like all 4 of these books. These books are all great. These books are all fantastic. A lot of them are very packed with, new stuff and new lore revelations and a whole bunch of other things that are very important for dissecting this story. So I do recommend all of them. But I have also laid out my personal preference for all of them. And also, of course, is that, Escape the Pizzaplex is the most recent of these 3 stories to come out. So, before. So, yeah, that's the most recent one. But, yeah, if you want to know the orders that they came out in, I have reviewed them in the orders that they've come out in. But yeah, you can get all these books out. You can pick them up at Barnes & Noble or Amazon or wherever you have your favorite books, wherever your favorite books are sold. But yeah, overall, I like them. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack with these books, and I do like them as, choose your own adventure novels. They do offer an interesting idea for choose your own adventure novels, and that you have to figure out how to play through them the right way in order to get the true ending, which then unlocks a new bonus playthrough you can play through. Well, except for VIP, which works a little bit differently. But overall, I like all of these books. So, yeah, I like how they're handled. I like the bonus item aspect of them and the second playthrough aspect of them a lot. And obviously, I gotta give you a general plot synopsis of what to expect from these books. I recommend reading them for yourself because there's some interesting stuff in them, and some interesting, reading stuff in them that I recommend, if you want to read them, and test your media literacy out, then yeah, go through them and then read the books. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff in here, and I think you will like them. But in any case, that is gonna do it for my massive review thing on all of these books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this different kind of format. Obviously, this is a bit of a bigger video, so hopefully you guys liked. Hopefully I did a good job of, giving my concise thoughts on all of them, and hopefully you guys enjoyed my reviews of all of them, because these were a lot of fun to go through, and I hope you guys enjoyed them as well. But in any case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this massive review thing. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to check out my Blue Sky. Link is down in the description. It helps keep up to date with things. It helps out. Yeah, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because that helps out to support the channel. Be sure to check out my second channel. Again, link is down in the description. There's a video over there for you guys to watch right now. You can go check that out. But go do that. Be sure to go and check out my Discord. Link is down in the description. I would like to hang out with you guys. There is also a Minecraft server connected through that, so please go check that out. It's a Bedrock server, so please do so. Be sure to go and check out my Twitch. We stream Saturdays and Sundays, or at least I will when I get to on a normal schedule again, so please go check that out. That'll probably later this week I'll actually be streaming again. You'll see that, but yeah, go check that out. Again, link is down in the description for that. Check out my Patreon, links down in the description. It helps support future projects, helps support the channel. I would appreciate if you were to go do so. Please go do so down in the description as well. And of course, finally, if you want to see more content from me, be sure to check out videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video, 8-man wrap of this video, whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or show more of what you like, then be sure to check both those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!